It's been over 2 months since prominent Putin critic Vladimir Kara-Murza was sentenced to 25 years in a Russian jail. He was arrested after publicly denouncing the illegal war in Ukraine. The sentence was widely denounced by the international community. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by Vladimir's wife in the studio, Evgenia. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us on Sky. How is your husband doing? When did you last get a chance to talk to him?
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, I haven't seen or spoken to Vladimir in over a year. So all the information that I get about him is from his lawyers. He's still kept at Moscow's 5th pretrial detention center because he's awaiting appeal. And after the appeal, and I think we all understand the outcome of that appeal, he will be transferred to strict regime to serve his quarter-of-a-century prison sentence for high treason, based on 5 public speeches that he made on different international platforms, talking about the war, talking about political repression in Russia and censorship of the media in the Russian Federation. He's kept at in the most secure block of that prison with the most dangerous criminals because Vladimir is considered as such. And this is I would say very logical, because anyone who dares oppose the Putin narrative in Russia today is seen and is portrayed by the authorities as either a criminal, a spy, a traitor, or an insane person, just like it was in the Soviet times.
And you're here in London to try and lobby for more support, obviously to help get your husband freed. How hopeful are you that the British government can do something? He's, of course, a dual British-Russian national, isn't he?
Well, Vladimir is indeed a dual national, and it's truly baffling for me, quite disappointing that I haven't seen any real strong action from the British government. And it's truly baffling that it was Canada and not the UK that was the first to introduce sanctions against Vladimir's perpetrators, Vladimir's persecutors. These sanctions were then followed by the US, and then the UK joined in. The sanctions were also recently introduced by the European Union and are now being introduced by Norway. And I would, of course, like for the British government to step in and be more forceful in advocating for Vladimir, because my husband survived 2 assassination attempts in the past. He survived 2 poisoning attacks in 2015 and 2017, perpetrated by a group of FSB operatives in the service of the Russian state, the same group that later poisoned Alexei Navalny with Novichok. And I realized that my husband is being held by the same people who tried to kill him twice. And I have no reason to believe that his life is not in danger now that he's held in a Russian prison and has just been sentenced to a quarter-of-a-century of strict regime. So, Canada did something amazing recently, an amazingly warm gesture of solidarity with Vladimir and all those who stand up to Vladimir Putin and denounce his regime and the war in Ukraine. Canada gave Vladimir an honorary citizenship. And that beautiful message is that the Russian state wants to portray all such people as traitors. And Canada said, well, we would be honored to have such a citizen. Well, Vladimir is a British citizen. And I would like for the British government to do something just as strong. But I found out that governments around the world, the political prisoners crisis and the hostage-taking crisis is rising everywhere. Autocrats do take hostages. And it seems that democracies around the world don't really have any instruments to deal with that rising crisis. For example, in the US, there is an office of the Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. And there is a specific law that stipulates that there is a set of criteria that a person has to meet in order for that presidential envoy to take on a case and continue and begin advocating for the person. Well, other democratic countries don't seem to have that, and I believe that this is a big problem because the crisis will be rising, whether we want it or not, whether democracies will be prepared and equipped to deal with it or not, because autocrats will be continuing to take hostages. And I believe that a creation of such an office here in the UK would be very useful.
Have you had conversations with the Foreign Office? What have they said about the work that they are doing behind the scenes, one would assume, or hope, and the lack of sanctions?
Well, I just arrived in the UK, and I will have a number of meetings during the next 2 days. So I hope to hear something positive from the FCDO, from the British government. And I have a positive attitude, and I am an optimist. And on top of that, I will also continue pushing. And they need to be prepared for that too. I will continue pushing for as long as needed to get results, because my husband survived 2 assassination attempts. His life is now again in danger. And I will continue fighting for him with all I've got.
Do you believe you'll get him out? Do you believe you'll see him again?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I will see him again. The idea was to raise our 3 kids together. He's not gonna wiggle out of it. Nope, I need him back in the picture, doing his part. The kids miss him terribly. They hadn't talked to him in over a year. Just recently, they were allowed one phone conversation with Vladimir, a 15-minute phone call after 14 months of being deprived of contact with their father. 15-minute call, that's 5 minutes per head, per child. That is atrocious. That is pure psychological torture. And I will do everything to bring him back.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, we've heard warm words. You mentioned America. There have been warm words about your husband from America, and you talked about this department that they have. But lots of warm words from around the world. Canada have actually done something. Would you like to see America doing more as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will continue pushing everywhere I can. And well, I believe, you see, the idea is these people in Russia, and we're talking about hundreds of political prisoners and thousands of people arbitrarily detained for standing up against the regime and against the war. We're talking about people whose only crime is to denounce what the current Russian regime is doing to our neighbor, what the current Russian regime is doing to Russia. And I believe that such voices deserve to be heard, and I believe that their stories deserve to be known, because if we want an alternative to Vladimir Putin, and of course we all want to see a democratic Russia, that is the only Russia that will stop being a threat to itself and everyone else. So if we want to see an alternative, there is an alternative. It's these people who go to grave risks, who risk their freedom and very often their lives to stand up to the murderous regime of Vladimir Putin. And I will continue fighting for my husband and for all those Russians who are being oppressed by the regime and who risk their lives to say that, no, despite, all the efforts by Putin's propaganda, not the entire Russian population stands behind Putin and his war. And there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Russians who actually publicly spoke out. And I believe there are millions who denounce the regime, but yes, are afraid to speak up. By recognizing the fight of those who do find the courage to do something, we will encourage more people to stand up.